think this is a great time, Cassandra, to talk to our next guest because it is, you know what? It's been a year of change, whether you like it or not. And it has caused a lot of people to reevaluate their priorities, their life, and what they really want. But change is really hard, and a lot of people don't know where to start. Joining us now, conveniently, is the founder of The Change Leadership and author of The Change You Want, Change Your Mindset, and Change Your Life. Please welcome to the show, Yvonne Akpoveta. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be on here.
Well, first, let's talk about The Change Leadership. Tell people a little bit about how it came to be and what you guys do. Okay,
so where do I start? I'd have to say it was born out of two things. The very first one being my background. I finished university. Should I age myself now? Maybe like 20 years ago.
Listen, I watched a video of you, and you can age yourself because you look very young.
Thank you. So this is about 20 years ago in the .com boom, and I remember coming out of university excited about getting my first job and, being in that job for life. That was what I was taught. You go to school, come out, get that job, and you're in it for like the next 20 years. And in the midst of all of the .com boom, you just had me getting this letter or being asked to come into this office, that dreaded call. And I was told, you're being made redundant, or we have to let you go because, the merger and acquisition, we have your role replicated somewhere else and all of that. But that was a shock to my system. And it was also the thing that really started to drive me about taking control of my life and my career and saying that it's no longer about living it for the HR team or this organization or mommy and daddy, because I'd lost my dad already, to take care of me. I had to drive the change that I wanted and I needed in my life. And then fast forward to the fourth industrial revolution that we're experiencing now of AI, robotics, 3D, AR, VR. All of those are transformative technologies that are, changing the way we work and shaping what we now call the future of work. And also we have the pandemic, which has just accelerated the future of work. So the change leadership came about 4 years ago, where as a change management strategist, I've been working in many organizations. And I always found that for every successful or failed change initiative, it always came down to leadership. And not just leadership at the top, but leadership across board for that individual contributor, for that person who had no title or position. Without the leadership across board, you would see organizations fail or projects fail. And when projects fail, what happens? Sometimes you find that people lose their jobs. And then when people lose their jobs, what does that mean? There's a greater impact on the community. And even with the pandemic, we've seen it now. With so many organizations being unable to pivot or change, there's a bigger impact on the community because when people lose their jobs, organizations fail, it impacts the community. And we all, one way or the other, are impacted. But when one part thrives, we all thrive together. So that's a long-winded answer, right?
No, but it's a great answer. And I think a lot of people, especially people who are maybe, in their later young adult years or like edging towards middle age, have been in that situation when they were kind of raised to think, you get a good job and you work in it forever. And then you retire and you have your pension. And it's not really the world that exists anymore. And then, businesses now, we're having to, in the last couple of years, just a couple of the issues that we've looked at is, appropriateness in the workplace and sexual misconduct issues, but then also diversity and inclusion. And so it's like on both sides, you're dealing with a lot of change and not really knowing where to go and how to deal with it.
Exactly, for sure. We're experiencing changes from all angles. 2020 has definitely been a year of change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about the change you want, change your mindset, change your life, because it seems like the change leadership is a little bit more business oriented, but then this is very person oriented.
Yes. So even with the change leadership where we serve professionals and organizations, professionals are still part of it because the audience we have at the change leadership events and conferences are really about preparing professionals to be able to lead and drive change in the organization. But saying that, we're also having to drive change in our personal lives. And the book that you mentioned, The Change You Want, is really about mindset. It's about that personal awareness. So in the book, we talk about, say, the different aspects. We talk about 21 points really all around mindset. That sounds a lot, but it's just 21 components that you need to look at when it comes to mindset. And when I go back to why I did that, again, I look at my clients that I coach, the professional as well as even personal needs types of clients who wanted to make change in their professional life, but it's always tied back to their personal life. And some of the reoccurring things that I kept on saying was mindset. Change cannot happen except you first of all look inwards. And so that's where we talk about self-awareness. Even when you're leading organizational change, one of the things that I say to the folks that I coach and when I do consulting and advisory is tell them to start with self-awareness. So when they say, we need to manage resistance to change, somebody is pushing back, this client is pushing back, or this employee is pushing back, I always say go back to self-awareness. And that's one of the concepts we also talk about in the book on personal change. You have to start with personal self-awareness to really understand yourself, know where it is that you're coming from and where it is you want to go in order to even be able to make any type of change you want to make. So what I found that if you don't have self-awareness, if you're not focused on your mindset, for every 2 steps you take forward, it's always 1 step backward, and I dare say even 3 steps backwards. Because you feel frustrated when the changes aren't happening and you just totally give up. So it starts with self-awareness. We talk about I talk about environment. I talk about things around visualization in the book. I myself sometimes have to go back to the book and read it to help me, move forward and make change in my own life.
How do you teach self-awareness to someone who is just oblivious?
Gosh, how do you do that? It starts with desire. Again, it's getting to that desire where you feel that you really need to make a change. So let me give you this example. At one point in time, I managed to lose about 80 pounds, But before losing that amount of weight, prior to that, for years, my whole teenage life, I had been overweight. In my 20s, I'd been overweight. For most of my 30s, I had been overweight. And, but there wasn't that deep need or self-awareness. Yes, I knew I needed to lose weight, and I wouldn't really make any change if, it just seemed like a nice-to-have thing to do. But when I got to a point where I kind of got kicked in the backside, there was this big catalyst or something that really said to me, something needs to change. I came to a point of where I was totally dissatisfied and I felt immobilized. I couldn't move forward. So it started with that desire where you feel something needs to drastically change for you to move forward. Then you become open-minded. Again, another concept I talk about in the book. You become open-minded to say, look, anything right now to help me move forward. So when you become open-minded to the fact that you need change to happen and you're open to ideas and you're open to new ways of doing things, then you begin to explore that self-awareness because you now are open to change. You now are open to ideas when people speak to you. You're now open to feedback when people share with you. Because one of the things we have is the Johari's window, whereby we always have that blind spot somewhere where we don't know everything. We don't see everything. We have our known self. But there's always that unknown self, and there's always that self that other people see that you don't see. And then there's also that place where it's a blind spot. Nobody's seeing it. You're not seeing it, and it takes something happening. So the Johari's window is a good way for somebody to explore self-awareness. So it's spelled Johari. Johari's window, that's a good way that people can start to explore self-awareness.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's, it's whether people have kind of come to it yet or not, we're all going to have to adapt. And this year is certainly highlighting that. But we've also seen, this year we've seen a lot of pushback too, and people really resistant to change. And I think we see that a lot. First of all, like with kind of the anti-mask movement, and then people who are, bizarrely anti-Black Lives Matter. And where do you think that really strong resistance to change comes from, and will those people be able to change?
I think it's something that we face all the time in change when it's called, and we categorize it as managing resistance to change, and very interesting topics, because when I think about the anti-mask folks and think, why wouldn't anybody want to wear a mask? Or, you think about the anti-Black racist movement kind of thing, and you think, why? It's there. Why won't people see it's happening? And it comes down to one, status quo. Another thing it comes down to is fear. Another thing it comes down to is lack of knowledge. And then even when we talk about status quo, there's also that shift in power. So you have different elements that stop people from moving forward, or people resisting change. And let's talk about lack of knowledge. And I want to believe this was a lack of knowledge. I'll share an example with you. This was quite a few years ago. I had an experience with a colleague. I was one of those people that was thankfully, after the hard work, considered a high performer. So there was this event where we had some key leaders coming into the organization, and they identified a few of the high performers that would meet with some of these leaders that were coming from traveling in globally. And I went back into a meeting with some of my colleagues, and they were like, "Oh, Yvonne, where were you? What happened to you? We missed you at the meeting." And I excitedly shared, I got to meet so people. And then one of my colleagues said to me, "Oh, you were the token Black person that was selected to be there?" And I was like, at that point in time, it was water off the dog's back, because I didn't even think anything about it. I just brushed it off because I'm confident enough to know that I wasn't the token Black person, and even if it was the token Black person, so what? But I didn't pay any attention to it. But what I do regret is that I did not take time at that point in time to stop and correct her and educate her and help her understand that, that could be hurtful to somebody, or that's not the kind of thing we say. So there's that lack of knowledge where people just don't even realize what they're saying or what they're doing or how that could impact somebody. So that's where you get some pushback because of that lack of knowledge. Or it could even be status quo, because when they start to say, with the anti-Black movement, racist movement, anti-Black racist movement, people, they start to say, if they are suddenly asking for more power, they're suddenly asking for more jobs, if they're suddenly asking and making all these demands, what does that mean for us? Does that mean that we're losing our own power? Does that mean that there are now fewer jobs for us? Does that mean there are less opportunities to grow within the organization? Or if we look at the anti-mask movement, people at this point in time are just thinking about their comfort. They're like thinking it's difficult to wear a mask. So for me, I have pretty small, petite, cute ears. I just added the word cute, but it's just to have petite ears. So having to wear a mask and put especially the non-surgical ones, and put it around my ear, and then if I have to wear glasses or sunglasses or something, all of that around my ear is pretty uncomfortable, So it could just be something as simple as some people just feel it's uncomfortable, so they push back and they don't want to wear it. Or some people just like to, say they feel their rights are being violated. They're just people that feel their rights are being violated. I still wonder why they would do that. But it comes into all that fear of losing their rights, or maybe it's beyond saying that what is right about the pandemic, but saying what is the government doing to us? Why should the government dictate to us how we live our life? So they're pushing back against being asked to do something, not necessarily against the mask. They're pushing back against authority.
Right.
So it's beyond just looking at the mask. So there are different reasons why people would do things. And one of the things that I do from a change perspective is always try to lead with empathy. It's never saying this person is right or that person is wrong. But what we do from a change perspective, and that's one of the key change leadership competencies that I teach on, is saying let's apply empathy. So in my case, where I had that colleague speak to me in that way, I would apply empathy in such a way to say, why would she be saying that? Where's she coming from? And it could just be because she doesn't know any different, and her background and her upbringing, and that's what she's been taught to believe. And, I address it from that way in terms of starting to educate her around it, And from the mask perspective, it could just be, why are they pushing back? So once you start to listen to some of these protests and what they're saying and listen to some of the words, then you begin to address the way you speak to them, or tailor your communication, or tailor your tactics in addressing it in a way that is their language and appeals to them and addresses the concerns they have. So, yes, you will always have that resistance to change. It's looking at the ways that we can manage that resistance to change, and that's where we explore various change leadership competencies. I teach on about 10 of those competencies in terms of how we address and manage some of these issues when it comes to leading and driving change.
I mean, I think, thank goodness you have resources out there for people, because it is, look, I'm someone who I love personal growth, and I love working on my mindset and my attitude and all that kind of stuff. And I think, but I know it's overwhelming for people, certainly when they start. And then especially, if, as you're saying, right, these are deep, some of the resistance to change is very deeply run. And so it's going to take a lot of digging. But a wonderful place to start and to get working on it is the change you want, change your mindset and change your mind. And then if you need help in a, more of a business level, check out the change leadership and see all the different programs and ways that they can support you. Yvonne, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a bit of your story and what you do with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on board, for your show. Thank you for providing the opportunity for me to discuss this area.
Absolutely.
So thanks for having me.
And people can go to thechangeleadership.com to find out more.